I have worked the night shift at Depot 7 for 2 years, and in that time, I have learned to love the hours between midnight and 4 in the morning. The dock is quiet then. The city is quiet. The routing boards update on their own. The trucks run their manifests, and a man can think without being asked to perform thinking. My daughter Nora is asleep by 9, so I am never missing from anything that matters. I work my hours. I drive home the gray light. I wake her up for school. I make her breakfast, and then I sleep while she is learning long division and how the water cycle works. It is a life I designed on purpose. I am proud of it in a way I don't often talk about. I was not expecting Sylvia Vance. She arrived on a Tuesday, the first Tuesday of October, with one assistant and no advance warning beyond a brief email to the depot manager, Lou Ferris, informing him that Ms. Vance would be visiting Depot 7 as part of the Harwell acquisition review. Lou told me this at shift change with the expression of a man who had been handed a live wire. I told him I would clean up the dispatch bay. He said he owed me a favor. I told him I'd collect it someday, and I meant it. She came in at 11:30, before her own people arrived, while I was still running the overnight departure sequence. The dock outside was loud, diesel engines warming, reversing alerts, the shout of a loader calling a short count on a pallet. But inside the dispatch bay, it was just screens and the low tone of the radio and the particular silence of a room built for focus. She walked in and stood at the doorway for a moment, looking at the boards. "You run this?" she said. "Most nights," I said. She asked if she could watch. I told her I didn't mind. She pulled a stool to the corner and didn't say another word for 20 minutes. She just watched me work the boards. That is what I remember first about Sylvia Vance. Not the suit, not the assistant pacing in the hallway. The fact that she could be quiet. A lot of people at her level have forgotten how or never learned. She had remembered or had never needed to forget. When the 11:55 run was out and the boards had settled, she asked me how I organized the departure sequencing. I told her. She asked a second question, sharper, about the buffer logic I used when two long hauls overlapped at the same dock door and the system had to choose. I told her that too. She nodded slowly, the way a person nods when something fits a pattern they have been trying to name for a long time. "Where did you learn that?" she said. "I worked in logistics software for a while," I said. "Before this." She looked at me for a moment with an attention that was neither warm nor cold, just very precise. Then her assistant appeared in the doorway with a message, and the night moved on. She came back on Thursday. No assistant this time. She brought 2 coffees from the gas station down the road, the kind that come in styrofoam cups and taste like they were brewed in a previous decade. She set one on the corner of my station without asking whether I wanted it. I drank it. We talked for the better part of an hour about routing theory, the real kind, not the presentation kind, about the difference between optimizing a system for speed and optimizing it for resilience, about what happens to a supply chain when you engineer it only for the best case scenario, and then the best case doesn't come. She had thought about these questions seriously. She had opinions that were her own. It was the best conversation I had had in a long time, and I drove home that morning in better spirits than I could fully account for. On Saturday, she came back once more in the afternoon when I was doing a handover check before my off days. She shook hands with Lou, walked the dock, asked the loaders questions they weren't used to being asked. I watched her from the window of the dispatch bay. She had the same quality I had noticed the first night. She was looking at what was actually there, not at what she had already decided to see. There's a kind of intelligence that operates like that, patient and present, and it is rarer than the other kind. She stopped at the window and caught me watching. She smiled, not unkindly. I went back to my checklist. I thought about those 3 conversations the following week more than I should have. I told myself it was because she was a serious person and serious people are rare. That was true. I also told myself it was nothing more than that, which I am less certain was true. But I had Nora, and Nora was enough, and the life I had built was precisely the life I wanted. What I did not know, what I had no reason to know, was what was happening in Chicago. Sylvia's company, Vance Meridian, was built on a logistics platform called Meridian Core. It ran every routing decision the company made. 12,000 trucks, 41 depots, 300,000 delivery addresses across 11 states. It had been licensed and expanded and rebuilt in layers over 15 years, the way all working software eventually is, until it had become a vast and complicated structure that almost nobody remembered the foundation of. Almost nobody. Her VP of technology was a careful man named Gerald Marsh. Gerald had been running due diligence on the Harwell acquisition for 6 weeks, and part of that process required him to audit the core platform's IP chain from the beginning. You do not acquire a company without understanding what you actually own all the way down. He pulled the original development records and worked backward through the build history, layer by layer, and at the bottom of the stack, he found something that made him set his coffee down and stare at his screen. The routing engine at the heart of Meridian Core, the logic that governed how every load moved, how every scheduling conflict was resolved, how the system learned to choose resilience over raw speed, had been written by a contractor 15 years ago. The work-for-hire agreement was airtight. The IP had transferred cleanly. There was no legal question of any kind. But Gerald Marsh was thorough. He found a contractor's name. He ran it against their current employee roster as a matter of habit, the way a man with this kind of mind runs every number he has against every other number he has, because sometimes they match. He called Sylvia at 7 in the evening on a Wednesday. The man who wrote the routing engine, Gerald said, Dexter Callum. He works nights at Depot 7. Sylvia told me later how that had landed. She said she sat on the phone for 10 full seconds without speaking, which was not a thing she did. She said the silence was because she was running back through our 3 conversations, all of them, in order and understanding with each one that she had been talking to the person who had built the ground under her company's feet and that he had never said a word about it. She said it felt less like a discovery and more like a correction, like something had been out of alignment without her knowing it, and now it had clicked into place. She called me the following morning before my shift. Nora was at school. I was drinking coffee at the kitchen table, reading about a weather system coming in off the lake. Mr. Callum, she said. It's Sylvia Vance. Good morning, I said. A pause. You wrote the Meridian Core routing engine. I wrote the first version, I said. Your people have rebuilt it considerably since then. I'll be careful about giving me too much credit. 15 years ago, she said. About that. You've been working at my depot for 2 years. Yes. And you never said anything. I thought about how to answer that honestly. It didn't come up, I said, and it wasn't mine anymore. I signed it over fair and square. That was the deal, and it was a fair one. I needed the money at the time, and the work was the best I'd ever done, and I wanted it to go somewhere it would actually be used. It did. That has always been enough for me. She was quiet for a moment. I'd like you to come to Chicago, she said, and her voice had changed. More careful, more deliberate. My board wants to meet the man who designed the system. We're at a critical point in the Harwell integration, and there are long-term architecture questions I want the right person in the room for. I want you there. I looked at the calendar on the kitchen wall. Nora had drawn a star on Tuesday in purple crayon. She had drawn it 3 weeks ago and had been pointing at it ever since. I can't leave Tuesday, I said. That's my daughter's school play. The silence that followed was the longest one yet. How old is your daughter? Sylvia said. 9, I said. She's playing the lead. A tree. She has been practicing her lines for 6 weeks. The tree has 3 speeches and what she describes as an important emotional arc. There was something on the line that might have been a laugh that caught itself before it fully arrived. Wednesday, she said. Can you do Wednesday? Wednesday works fine, I said. She flew to Greenfield on Tuesday evening. I didn't know that until later. She didn't tell me, and I wasn't looking for her in the gymnasium at Millbrook Elementary, where folding chairs had been arranged in rows and hand-painted programs were being distributed by second graders who took their ushering responsibilities with great seriousness. I was in the second row, holding a piece of cardboard I had painted at the kitchen table that morning while Nora watched to make sure I was doing it right. On one side it said Nora. On the other side it said the tree. She had inspected both at breakfast, turned the sign over twice, and ruled it acceptable. The play was 40 minutes long. Nora's tree had 3 scenes. In the first, she stood very still at center stage and delivered her opening lines in the voice she uses when she is concentrating hard. Careful, even each word given its weight. In a second, she spread her arms wide and held them there for a full minute while the wind, played by four children with ribbons on sticks, moved around her. She had explained to me that it was important the audience understand what a tree actually feels when the wind comes, which is not fear, but something more like recognition. She had used the word recognition. She is 9. I do not know where she gets these things. In the third scene, she delivered the play's closing lines to the back wall of the gymnasium, steady and unhurried, and a woman 3 seats to my left pressed her hand to her chest. I had both sides of the sign in the air at the curtain call. I was not concerned with how this looked to anyone. In the parking lot afterward, in the cold air, with parents and children streaming past, I found Sylvia Vance leaning against a rental car with her coat collar turned up. She had the look of someone who has just watched something they had not expected to be moved by and has not yet decided what to do with that. Nora was still inside collecting her costume. She was very good, Sylvia said. She worked hard, I said. Sylvia looked out at the road for a moment. I owe you an apology. For what? 2 years, she said. You were there the whole time. And I never once thought to ask who was actually running the overnight boards. She paused. My company runs on work you did. I didn't know your name. You knew my name by Thursday, I said. You brought the coffee. She looked at me with an expression I found difficult to read and then didn't try to. That's a gracious way to let me off the hook. I'm not letting you off anything, I said. I'm telling you it's all right. The deal I made was fair. The work went where it was supposed to go. That is all I ever needed from it. Nora came through the gymnasium doors, trailing tinsel from her costume. She spotted me, registered that I was talking to someone, and slowed to a walk appropriate for a person who had just completed an important emotional arc. I introduced them. Nora shook hands. Sylvia said the tree's second scene, the one with the wind, was the finest moment of the evening. Nora said she knew. She said it without vanity, the way you state something that is simply accurate. After Nora had walked ahead to our car, Sylvia made me a formal offer, a consulting role in the Harwell integration, a long-term architecture review, fair terms, flexible hours built around my life, not the other way around. I told her I needed to think overnight. She said that was reasonable. Then she said, "Is there a condition? You seem like a man who sets one." "One," I said. "The work for hire clause stands. I signed that clean 15 years ago, and I'm not asking to revisit it. But when the integration is finished, when whatever comes next is built, I want my name on the documentation. Not for the credit, so that the next person who has to maintain it knows who to call when something breaks, and knows there is someone to call." She was quiet for a moment. "That's not a condition," she said. "That's a policy. I should have done it already. I'll make it standard." I drove Nora home through the dark streets of Greenfield. She was quiet for a block or two in the way she gets after a big night, letting it settle into herself where it would be kept. The cardboard sign was folded in the back seat. Was she nice? Nora said. She was, I said. Did she really like the second scene? She did. She said it was the best part of the whole evening. Nora looked out the window at the passing houses. "That's the one where the tree figures out what it is," she said. I kept my eyes on the road ahead. The streetlights were coming out of the dark one by one, steady and reliable, each one doing exactly what it was built to do. "Yeah," I said. "I think that's how it usually works."